In this lesson, we're going to examine the human bases for socialization. Refer to page 7 in your third study guide, and there is supportive information in chapter 3 in the textbook. Bear in mind that via our examination of the human bases for socialization, focus on those that, on the one hand, make socialization absolutely necessary. Put in another way, we couldn't survive without socialization. On the other hand, there is one basis that facilitates, makes the process of socialization, so to speak, possible. So let's look at each one of these, starting off with the first one. We humans lack instincts, or if we do have them, they're not very strong. What exactly is an instinct? Great question. A lot of definitions out there. Instincts might be thought of as a natural or inherited aptitude, impulse, or capacity. We're talking about something that is biologically inherited, and it's an unchanged tendency for a living organism to make complex and specific responses to various kinds of changes or stimuli in the environment in which they live. And again, all this is done without involving reason. An example might be illustrated here. The hunting instincts of big cats, like this leopard attacking wildebeest in Africa. We can kind of joke, and a lot of people do, both in a direct and indirect way about instincts. Our friends Calvin and Hobbes, for example, bring it into play. Do we humans actually have a survival instinct? I've heard folks tell me that, yet if it were truly strong, it wouldn't permit, again, certain self-destructive behaviors, particularly suicide. Or, again, another rather humorous way to look at instincts is by Cuppy. What's important for you to remember is that we humans, because we don't have instincts, or if we do have them, they're not very strong, we're not pre-programmed to behave in certain ways. This is the basis for human creativity. If we had strong instincts, that would impact our capacity to learn. That capacity would be significantly limited. We humans have to learn appropriate social and personal behavior, and we can be influenced and directed by others. But at the same time, we can refuse direction and find different ways, producing new as well as unique and varied patterns of behavior. Now, secondly, bear in mind, we humans need to interact with other humans. This is necessary for us to develop in a human way. If humans at a very early age are isolated or placed in a position where they have very limited interaction with others, the consequences can be quite dire. The effects can be negative, both physically and mentally. There's some very, very good information in the text highlighting this, particularly with respect to isolated children. Some of you may be aware of the very tragic case of Jeannie. To the left is how she appeared when, in fact, she was quote-unquote rescued from a dire situation. This is her much later in life. Jeannie, when rescued, was approximately the age of 13. She had experienced from birth repeated abuse by her father, apparently a man who really didn't like children. He may have been responsible for the death of one of Jeannie's older siblings, but she was kept in a dark garage room. During the day, she was literally tied to a potty chair and put in a kind of device created by her father that resembled a straitjacket. And then at night, he put her in a mummy-style sleeping bag, again, very much like a straitjacket. When she was rescued, she weighed 59 pounds and had the mental capacity of a 1-year-old. Now, with intense treatment, she became physically healthy, but her social and language skills remained that of about a 3 to 4-year-old child. And despite efforts on the part of the researchers to, in effect, socialize her, she tended to engage in a lot of socially offensive behaviors. She really liked anything plastic. And if you happen to be, again, wearing anything plastic that she wanted or carrying it, she would literally, again, try to rip it from you. And she would openly masturbate. But literally, when she was discovered, the researchers thought she might be maybe 3, 4, 5 years old. They were just stunned to find that she was 13. She currently lives in a home for developmentally disabled adults. And again, you want to keep in mind, she never developed language skills beyond that of a 3 to a 4-year-old child. We need interaction with others. I remember a story of one of the early rulers of the Holy Roman Empire, a guy who thought there was a universal language, and he decided to put it to the test. His assumption was it was probably some variation of the language spoken by the ancient Hebrews. So he put out a proclamation, by hook, crook, I don't quite know why, how and why. 12 children were brought to his castle. He assigned each child to a nurse, but he specifically instructed the nurses, do not talk to these children. Don't sing to them. Meet their physical needs, but nothing else. Because I want to determine whether or not my theory is correct. Once they start talking, will they start using a language similar to that of the ancient Hebrews? Well, I think you probably know what happened. Within less than 2 weeks, all of these babies were dead. Some of you also may very well be aware of studies that were done by the Harlows some years ago. This is Harry Harlow, and he worked with rhesus monkeys. And he basically reared some of them shortly after birth in isolation. In other words, they were deprived of any interaction with other rhesus monkeys. Once they reached maturity, he introduced them into an enclosure with other rhesus monkeys of exactly the same age, but they had been reared in more normal circumstances and situations, interacting with their peers as well as with their mothers. What was the result? Well, it's highlighted right here. Those that were deprived of interaction simply didn't know how to respond. Often they would spend their time rolled up in a ball in the corner of the enclosure itself. What does this highlight? We need interaction with others. Pay attention to some interesting sections within the text that highlight this as well. There's one interesting study having to do with institutionalized children, and focus on what happened to the control group versus children of the same age who were assigned to the care of mentally challenged women. Fascinating. Once again, we need interaction with others. I realize you can push this study of Harlow too far. You can't compare humans automatically to monkeys. But again, it highlights we members of the primate order, we need interaction with others. Now, a third key factor that I want you to keep in mind that figures in as a basis for socialization is, again, we humans have the longest period of physical and social dependency. Physically, probably somewhere between 5 and 7 years, according to a lot of research. And it can be argued that we're socially dependent for a lifetime. Why? Well, the primary factor that accounts for this is between our ears. We are big-brained primates. The human brain grows to 80% of its adult size during the first 3 years of life. As a result of us being big-brained primates, we're born in a very early state of physical development. Some of you might, again, think about how come your mom couldn't have given birth to you in the form you were at, say, 10, 11, or 12? Well, you know the answer to that. She'd be dead. Okay. The female birth canal simply cannot accommodate a fully developed human being. So a great deal of our maturation occurs outside the womb, outside the oven, so to speak. So in order to survive, human infants have to depend upon the protection and guidance of others. You've been around babies. They're certainly attractive and interesting, but what can they do? Well, really, when you think about it seriously, other than crying, sucking, pooping, and peeing, that's about it. Somebody's got to take care of them. Now, our period of social dependency is increased in large part because we have so much to learn. And if any of you have been around cats, dogs, and other animals, you know that more often than not, they're ready to hack it on their own within just a few days, weeks, or no more than perhaps a little more than a month. Now, last but not least, as we look at these human bases for socialization, we have the capacity for symbolic communication, language. The human potential for learning is enhanced and facilitated by language. It's one of the primary mediums via which you and I learn. Think about for just a moment what language allows us to do. We can express emotions and feelings. We can gain knowledge. We can acquire definitions as to values and attitudes. We can recreate past experiences. We can speculate about what lies ahead. And very important, we can pass along all the knowledge we've acquired to others. Furthermore, we can define our settings, our environments. We can even give meaning to the nature and the composition of reality. But above all, the capacity for language has permitted we humans to create the very essence of the human way of life, culture. So there is a biological tie-in here. Bear that in mind. Next lesson, we'll take a look at some of the key aims of socialization.